trauma therapy field is structured makes peer support feel like it's a privilege when in reality, it should just be a given. I know it feels like the backing you need is just out of reach, like that consultation, membership, or a space to be honest about this work is something that you have to earn instead of something that should be built into this work in our profession. This is not an accident. There are major systems level problems in our field that have created such an imbalance in equity that, frankly, is only getting worse. So, today we're going to call a thing and talk about the inequity running rampant in our field and how we can start to shift the scales and lift all of us up together. Hi, I'm Jenny Hughes, founder of the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective, a professional community where trauma therapists get to just be human together. Equity is not just another buzzword. It's a structural necessity that determines who gets to sustain a career in trauma therapy and who burns out. When we talk about equity in trauma therapy, we understandably focus on our clients. That's what we're trained to do, to figure out who has access to care, who gets resources, and who gets left behind. But those same inequities exist for us as trauma therapists. And we have to talk about them because if you can't keep doing the work that you love, the people who need you will not have access to care no matter what you do about the inequities that they are facing every day. I know it's hard to hear that. We are not trained to think about ourselves, but it is the truth. And one of the most simple and let's acknowledge most scary ways to improve inequity in our trauma therapist spaces is through peer support. I know that's tough to hear. And I'm not just talking about emotional validation or venting together, as great as those things are. I'm talking about creating the structural systems that allow all trauma therapists to thrive, not just the ones with the most access to resources. And so today we'll go into how peer support is a systems level intervention for us as trauma therapists, how a lack of structured peer support fuels all of these inequities, and what we can do to shift this together. So let's start by redefining trauma therapist communities as a systems level intervention for us that really determine who has access to the resources necessary to keep doing the work that we love. That's a lot, right? To think about it as a systems level intervention for us. But to understand why therapist communities are a systems level intervention, we first need to look at systems theory, and Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model is a great place to start. So I want you to reach all the way back into the grad school parts of your brain for this and just picture that classic nested circles of the ecological model that you see here, which represent how our environments impact us at all those various levels. So, viewing this through the lens of the systems that you interact with as a trauma therapist, the microsystem level there, right in the middle, is where your immediate environment has the most direct impact. These are the relationships and structures that shape your daily experience as a trauma therapist. So, think about your colleagues, supervisors, consultation groups. These are the people that you lean on or wish you could lean on when you need support. They're in your daily life. Your microsystem is the foundation of your professional well being. And if you've ever felt like you were just better able to handle a tough case because you had solid consultation right before going into that session, that is the microsystem at work. Now, moving outward, we have the mesosystem, which is all about the connections between those immediate relationships. And it's not just about having a supervisor, but about how your supervision relationships affect your therapy sessions. It's how your workplace culture impacts your clients' experiences. And it's how the way that you feel in consultation group changes the way that you approach clinical decisions. The mesosystem is about the bridges between the different parts of your professional life. And if those connections are strong, they support your ability to grow as a trauma therapist. Next, we have the exosystem, which influences your work indirectly, even if you are not engaging with it every single day. These are things like professional organizations, licensing boards, insurance policies, all those external structures that shape what's possible for you as a therapist. So, if you've struggled with workplace policies that are just outdated and do not prioritize your well being, religious practices, or individual needs, that's the exosystem right there, creating barriers for you. If you've had to navigate rigid insurance requirements that tell you exactly the kind of care that you can provide, it's the exosystem limiting that flexibility in trauma therapy. And all of that is wrapped inside the macro system, which is the larger cultural and systemic forces shaping trauma therapy as a field. Society's attitude towards mental health goes here, the way therapy services are funded, and accessibility to education and training for trauma therapists are all part of the macro system. So, if you've ever felt like you had to justify the value of trauma work, or been frustrated by the lack of financial support for therapists, or noticed how marginalized communities, both clients and therapists alike, face even more barriers in this field, that is the macro system at play. Finally, we have the chronosystem, which is all about time, how systems evolve and how they shape therapists at different stages of their careers. The field of trauma therapy isn't static, right? And policies change, treatment approaches shift, generational differences impact how new therapists are trained. And, if for example, you've been in the field for a while, you probably notice how the work that you did 10 or 20 years ago is not exactly the same as the work that you're doing today. That is the chronosystem shifting underneath you. Okay, so why does all of this matter? Because when we talk about peer support, we are not just talking about something nice to have. We're talking about something that supports us at every single level of our profession. Trauma therapist communities are a systems level support that can help counteract the stress, isolation, and systemic challenges that make this work harder than it needs to be. And just as we can apply something like Bronfenbrenner's ecological model to demonstrate why clients don't heal in isolation, the same goes for you as a trauma therapist. Your professional success, and dare I say survival, depends on the systems around you, including mentorship, consultation, and peer support. When we talk about career sustainability, we often frame it as this individual issue, like therapists just need to work harder at self care or set better boundaries. But real sustainability comes from this structural support, not individual effort. This is the key to pushing back against long held beliefs and messages that if you're struggling, it must mean you need better boundaries, stronger self care, or a different mindset. These things totally ignore the systemic factors that determine who gets to thrive in this work. For example, a therapist with a strong professional network is going to get mentorship from experienced colleagues in their microsystem, more referrals and career opportunities because of a strong mesosystem, and the endurance and grit needed to manage all the moving parts because of an exosystem that's there for them, and so much more, right? Not just that, but a therapist without these relationships, they struggle to build their practice or even find career options. They have to navigate complex cases and burnout alone, and they're more likely to leave the profession altogether. Now, I want to be really clear here that this is not about who's more dedicated as a trauma therapist. It's about who has access. This is why professional relationships are not a luxury, they're a necessity. And if we want a more equitable profession, we have to create spaces where systemic support is the norm, not an afterthought. So, how do we start shifting this? How do we make sure systemic support is not just something for those who can afford expensive supervision or training? We start with our microsystem, the zone of influence closest to us, and something that we're going to examine together right now by auditing your access to these supports. So, grab some paper, a pen, whatever you like to write with, and I want you to write down your answers to these questions. I recommend that you pause after each of them so you can really take time to answer. First, who do I turn to for professional support? Then, Is my network diverse, or do I only have access to a limited group of perspectives? Last, are there places where I could expand my professional spaces and learn from even more diverse voices? Now, I want you to look at your answers, reflect on them, really let them soak into your brain and body. And on a scale from 0 to 10, rate how much access to systemic support you have right now based on these answers. Listen to your gut. Go with the first number that comes to you on this scale, where 0 means no access and 10 is the most. Let's say if you gave yourself a 7 or higher, I want you to ask yourself some additional follow up questions, okay? So, one, am I sharing knowledge with therapists who might not have the same connections? How can I amplify the voices of colleagues who might be overlooked? And where can I offer mentorship, collaboration, or support to create more equitable spaces? I want you to ask yourself these questions because if you do have access to systemic support right now, the best way to sustain and enhance this is by sharing it with other trauma therapists who are needing it. Because by lifting them up, you are also going to rise. And if you don't have strong systemic support, you scored a 6 or lower, you gave yourself a score of 6 or lower on this scale. First and foremost, know that this is not your fault. We work in a broken system. And even as it's not your fault, now that you have this awareness, you may want to start shifting things. So, on that same paper, I have questions for you to answer. First, where do I feel the most isolated in my work, and what kind of support would help? Then think of the specific areas where you feel alone, whether it's clinical decision making, career growth, emotional support, business strategy, whatever it may be. Understanding what is missing helps you seek out the right kind of peer support. Next, ask yourself, what small step do I want to take this month to build or strengthen my microsystem or mesosystem, aka my professional network? This might be something like joining a consultation group or starting one yourself, reaching out to a colleague for regular check ins, or going to a workshop where you can connect with other trauma therapists. Then ask yourself, who in my current professional circle has access to resources that I don't? And how can I connect with them? How can I learn from them? Think about, asking for mentorship. Again, joining spaces where these conversations happen or collaborating in ways that create mutual support. If I could connect you with that person who gave themselves a 7 or higher on this scale, I would. That's because building equity starts with knowing who has access and finding ways to share and expand it. And no matter where you are on this scale from 0 to 10, remember, this is not just about making your own career sustainable. It's about shifting the entire field towards something more just, more accessible, and more human. Now, as we wrap up, I want you to know that equity in trauma therapy does not happen passively. It happens when we are working to build communities that create sustainability for all trauma therapists, not just the ones with the most access. This is what we do in the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective. And just like I said earlier, I wish I could connect you with that person that scored a 7 or higher. That's what we do in Brave. That's one of the many things that we do. We connect members with high access to members with lower access so that they can lift each other up. And it is so incredible to see the impact of these connections. Brave is not just a space to talk about cases, as you can see here. It's a space where therapists are actively working together to support each other in building sustainable, equitable careers. And it's intentionally priced at a point where all trauma therapists can join us while making sure that we are keeping the work that we do in Brave sustainable. This is an example of how we shift the profession. It's how we make sure no trauma therapist is left to figure it out alone. So, if you're ready to be part of that, you're going to find the link in the description. Reach out. Let us know what you're needing. Let us know in the comments and start to connect in the comments. Maybe those 7s and those 5s can find each other here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.